Hello and welcome to the Utah Hockey Podcast. My name is Kelly Queel. I am here with my adorable co-hosts, Cole Bagley and Michael Wolf. Michael Wolf is reporting live from sunny Southern California, where he will be reporting on the NHL draft. Not like hired by anybody. He just wants to do tickets. That.
Yeah, can we pretend like I'm official
Hold
in
on,
some way?
Yeah. Mike is reporting live for the Utah Hockey Podcast. We are all grateful for his time there. All right.
I am my sacrifice in going to the NHL draft. I'm doing this for the people, and it's not personal at all.
Yeah, that makes sense. No, it's right on brand. But actually, we appreciate you because we are going to have some insight that we wouldn't have without you. So we're grateful.
Yep. I am in my in-laws' backyard. I'm sure they're wondering. I had to try and teach them what a podcast was yesterday. So that's great. We're all learning new things here.
Yep.
Yep. We're about just a couple blocks away from where Nipsey Hussle got shot. So if you're familiar with Los Angeles, we're in a great part of town.
Beautiful. Love that for you. Stay safe out there. Okay, so let me catch the viewers/listeners up to speed on what has been happening. Basically, as far as the Utah Hockey Podcast goes, we had some complications with our normal Tuesday episode, so we had a mailbag episode ready to go. We heard some news last night that invaded all of our private lives that we have a big trade coming through Utah. Last night, JJ Peterka from the Buffalo Sabres was traded to Utah, and in turn, the Utah Mammoth traded Josh Doan and Michael Kesselring to Buffalo. I think some of the listeners who are new to what is happening were super confused that this was related to the draft in some way, and the three of us had a group thread going that we were thinking originally when we heard Peterka was coming to Utah that it could be the four of us. Producer Tanner's here too. The four of us.
I forget that you exist sometimes.
Are we supposed to acknowledge Producer Tanner?
You're not on camera, or are you?
I'm pretty forgettable, but
did you turn on the camera? Just
if I disappeared, you would notice.
We need a producer cam that's like
he's on it. He's on the producer
right
cam.
He's on.
Oh, that's amazing.
He's on.
So the four of us have a group chat. We didn't know what Peterka was being traded for initially. We heard there were some contingencies, which usually means that something is tied up in the trade that is happening. So we were thinking that they could have something to do in the draft. The Mammoth have the number 4 pick in the draft. It's a possibility even still, as we're talking here on a Thursday, that we make a trade and therefore our position in the draft would move as a result of that trade. And we were thinking that something might happen. Mm-hmm. But our contingency that we ended up finding out was that Peterka was asking to extend a contract, which the Mammoth gave to him. So even though this trade is close to the timeline of the draft, it is completely unrelated to the draft. Things like this happen during the hockey season and beyond all the time. On July 1st, free agency opens up, which means a lot of players who are do not have a contract are allowed to be kind of shuffled around as well. So we're going to see some of that prior to the draft. Then the draft is Friday. Tomorrow. Wow. It's come up so quick.
Yeah.
And then free agency will start July 1st. So a lot of those things are happening. Because I'm in my overalls, I also have to say a couple of things that were happening because Miss Rachel always explains things really well. And I just have to explain a couple questions that I have. When a trade happens, the players don't always know about it. The players don't always get asked about it. And they definitely aren't asked where they would like to be all the time.
Yeah.
So a lot of questions immediately right off the bat were like, did they know they were going? No, they did not. It's highly unlikely. We have assumed because we talked to Josh Doan that he asked to be moved away from Utah immediately after talking to us. I hope not. We love you, Josh. But Usually these players are also finding out from tweets and messages and things like that. So a little bit complicated. So let's speak to kind of the trade. And then we'll go into a little bit more about these players.
I guess what's your initial thoughts?
My initial thoughts are that when we were making this podcast last year, and I've had this thought really since being engaged with, because I feel like you grow up as a hockey fan, you're not as like aware of all the dates, you're not as aware of when free agency happens, you're not always super cued into like these little details. But as you grow up, and I say mature, but is being this passionate about hockey a mature thing? I think so. I feel like you become so much more aware of when things are happening. And personally, as a hockey fan, I feel like this week, these weeks surrounding the draft day are like Christmas for me, except for it's a Christmas on you don't know who your parents are. You don't know if your parents are super rich and loaded and you're just going to come home to like 50 presents under the tree just for you. Or if your parents are bum alcoholics and you're going to get beat for Christmas. We don't know.
Like Buffalo.
But in this situation, we have our parents are billionaires and they want to spend money on us. So I feel like there is this like heartbreak where you see players leaving that you love if trades are happening. But there's also this, especially free agency, it's like almost you. In our situation, we can't lose because we have a good team already. If we add people, it's just icing on the cake. So everyone should just love these weeks surrounding free agency and the draft, because obviously leading up to the draft, we're going to have trades, we're going to have crazy things happening. But I think like we all experienced last night, it was pretty clear that newer hockey fans in Utah were experiencing hockey heartbreak for the first time ever. And that made me feel kind of bad, because it is heartbreaking when you have players that you love leave. It's heartbreaking when you interview a player and then 2 weeks later they get traded. We're pretty sad because
that was last week. That was last Tuesday. That wasn't even 2 weeks.
Josh Doan is awesome and an incredible person, as well as a great player and a player with a lot of potential. So it was definitely a bummer to see him go. But my initial thoughts on this 2 weeks for these like first couple things happening, I'm just like so antsy, and it's like, just give me more, except for not too much more, just a little bit more.
I think definitely heartbreak initially. I just as a human, right, relate to these people just up and going wherever they need to go. I think it's like really jarring as a fan. I also think as a fan, we just did not think that these two were on the chopping block. It felt like we've been throwing around names for months and months at people who potentially could get traded, and these two were not on my radar at all. Speaking to Josh Doan, he's just a huge part of the Coyotes community. I don't even know if huge is right, because it's like next level godliness. I don't know. In the Coyotes community.
The Doan last name.
Doan last name is like enormous. And so that's huge. Both of these guys, Kesselring and Doan, are both coming off an IIHF gold medal. And so that was a huge story as far as the Utah Mammoth go. So I just think more than anything, these two were not on my radar. I was not anticipating that they would be traded. For them to both be traded on the same day is wild, but as a lot of people are saying, like, at least they have a friend. King and one cat can go, and that's fine. And genuinely, I mean, we can talk about them as humans all day long. They're just like the sweetest humans. They gave us so much as far as like social content and just like human content, and did so much for this community. So we're so grateful. At the end of the day, as Cole is about to say, it's a business. And
that's show business, baby.
That's showbiz, baby. We had to make some decisions. It feels heartbreaking to have two like very big Coyotes names be traded. But yeah, that's showbiz, baby.
Yeah, I think I would, and I know Cole's about to talk, but I would want to know from somebody who's interacted with the players so much, and I know has had, I guess if you were to give players marks at the end of the season for how well they treated the media, I think Josh
Mhm.
Stone and Michael Kesselring would get some pretty high grades from you, Cole. So as somebody who maybe knows them a little better, not necessarily how do you feel, because I know Cole doesn't have feelings, but how does this how does this how does this how does this make you? How do you react, Cole?
Yeah,
We're not talking about feelings here.
Cole's like,
We're men.
goodbye.
before I get into my heartless journalist take on the situation.
Exactly. That's what we want.
No, Josh, I mean, I would consider Josh a friend.
Me too.
You know, he was a pleasure to work with all season long. Always willing to talk, always willing to chat. And I bothered him all the time. You know, probably like once or twice a week in the locker room, going up to Josh being like, hey, can we have an interview?
I mean, as we saw, it's not like a media training thing. It's that he's a human being and responds really well. Where like we got off the call with Josh and we were like, he wasn't just giving us pucks in deep answers, which is a typical answer for an NHL player to just say, yeah, we just got to get pucks in deep. And Josh is very thoughtful with his responses.
Yeah,
so
we
it's like a
we
journalist
stopped
dream.
recording and kept talking.
Yeah.
After we
We
stopped
talked to
recording,
him for
kept
like another
talking
10
about,
minutes. Yeah.
yeah, it's like other things that it kind of just felt like we were talking to a regular guy, and I think that's almost more. It's more common in the sport of hockey, but it's not so common to find somebody who cares that much and really wants to give you their time. So
yeah, he's just like his dad. Just an incredible human being. You know, Mike, you obviously shared your story of, I think it was the inaugural game when you saw Shane at the Delta Center talking to fans for a long time, 20, 30 minutes, maybe even longer than that. I had an opportunity to talk with both of them after that game as well, outside the locker room, and just good people. And that's, excuse me, I feel like that's uncommon in professional sports. Not necessarily in the NHL, because in my experience with interviewing and being around NHL players, they are the cream of the crop. They are, you know, just good people who, they know that they're professional athletes and hockey players, but they're also people.
Yeah.
And they realize that you're a person, and they treat you with respect most of the time. And Josh was great. I mean, he probably is, like, he would be, for me, the standard of how an NHL player should act with the media and whatnot, is, you know, expounding on those relationships and having a good time. Like, there was times where we just chatted about stuff. Like, I'd give him crap about being a Diamondbacks fan and you know, how poor they were doing and stuff like that. So it was
reasonable.
Just fun. Yeah, it's fun to talk with him. And then Kess was also great. Another guy that was always willing to chat, and you know, I don't have anything bad to say about him. You know, they were fun. You know, there was multiple instances throughout the season where they're messing with each other in the locker room. You know, obviously, you know, Josh was joking around, taking shots at Kess on our podcast a week ago, talking about how, you know, Kess gets too much media attention and whatnot. It's just fun. You know, they were a fun dynamic, and I'm sure it's something that'll be missed by not only the fans, but probably the guys in the locker room. You know, they're big locker room players. So, but at the end of the day, it's a business. It's a winning business. And in my mind, this is a trade that Utah won. It almost feels like, you know, highway robbery in a sense. I mean, don't get me wrong. Doan and Kesselring are very good players, but you just got a great player. You know, you just got a player, you know, in similar conversations in terms of production and skill to Cooley and Gunther. Now, he doesn't have quite the most complete 200-foot game that those guys do, but I think that's going to come. You know, now he's playing for a team that prioritizes defense and has a much better defense. And so I anticipate those numbers to go up in terms of, you know, his defensive contributions. But offensively, 68 points last season, career highs in goals and assists. He is just dangerous around the net. He thrives off the rush. He thrives in close, and he's not necessarily a power forward per se. But, you know, the way that he pounces on rebounds and crashes the net, and he just delivers laser beams from the right face-off circle. He often is looking to be set up on one-timers. So, you know, you got Gunther from the left face-off circle. You got Peterka from the right face-off circle.
Deadly.
It's deadly. And, you know, that's why this is exciting. I know it's tough to lose, you know, fan favorites, especially just really good guys. But, you know, it's clear what Bill Armstrong is trying to do, and that's to build a championship team. That's to build a team that can compete for a Stanley Cup, and not just compete for a Stanley Cup, but do it at the right time. You know, we talked, you know, earlier last week on free agent fits and, what kind of players they should be looking for. And a lot of this class, per usual, are guys that are coming off of their first big contracts. They're 28, they're 29. That doesn't fit the timeline.
Yeah.
So what does Bill do? He goes out and he finds a 23-year-old
Right.
who has increased his points. He's doubled his point production from his rookie year 2 years ago. So 3 years ago. So over the last 2 seasons, he's seen 18-point increases, career highs this last year, and he was unhappy in Buffalo, which I also like that. I like that he's like, okay, well, this organization isn't going anywhere. Trade me, and Utah was able to get him, and not only get him, but sign him to a 5-year extension. Like I said, it's just these are masterful moves by Armstrong to build a contender. When, like he talked about yesterday, most of the time you're winning Stanley Cups when your guys are 27, 28, 29. Well, there's only a couple guys of that age right now, Clayton Keller, Mikhail Sergachev. And yeah, I think they're going to be a part of, hopefully what, a Utah team that does compete in a couple years, but you're waiting for Cooley and Gunther to really come into their own. And now you add Peterka and your long list of prospects, the 4th overall pick. This team is building for the future, and they're doing it really well.
I think what we need to reflect on also is that as much as we liked Doan and Kesselring as players, even Doan pointed out that he was disappointed in his lack of production this past season. And when you're looking at just the numbers, right? We're talking about like moneyballing everything all the time. When we're looking at just the numbers, they were not producing what we need them to produce to be considered a part of this roster. We have an elite group, and we need to, if anything else, score goals. That is like, the goal of hockey. Many times in my own league, we're saying things like, hey, we should score a goal, right? That is unfortunately how you get points and how you win games. And if players are not performing up to that standard, it's so unfortunate and it's so painful, but that is just the bottom line.
Yeah, they needed to add another scorer.
Yeah.
Absolutely. They were 8 points back from making the playoffs, and there were a lot of 1-goal games.
Oh,
for Utah.
don't forget all of these points-of-point overtime games that we just should have nailed.
So many overtime games,
Yeah.
so many close games, and so they needed to add somebody that could help them in that department, and you got to give up something.
Yeah.
And so I think when you look at this deal, the reason I think Utah won it, and it almost feels like a fleece, is yes, Doan and Kesselring are good players. They have some potential. But the fact that there were a lot of offers on Peterka. He was arguably the second, maybe the first, but definitely the second most sought after trade target for a lot of teams. And Saravalli earlier today was reporting that, hey, there were teams offering other enticing deals that involved multiple first-round picks, other young, highly talented players. Utah got away with this without attaching the 4th overall pick or any other prospects. I did not expect that.
Yeah.
When I first saw that this trade was going down, we were waiting on contingencies. I was like, okay, well, is the contingency the 4th pick? Is the contingency TJ Ginla or Kobo Doan? Nope. The contingency was just making sure that Peterka was going to sign that extension. So to get a player of that talent, again, 68 points. That's more than Logan Cooley had. That's more than Dylan Gunther had. He would have been second on the Mammoth last season. Obviously, Keller led the way with 90. But to get a player of that, talent, and to add him to Keller at 90 and Cooley at 65 and Gunther, I think, at 61, with all these players taking more steps, there's a very real possibility that Keller's knocking on the door of 100 and Cooley's knocking on the door of 75 to 80 and Peterka's doing the same thing and Gunther's doing the same thing. That's going to get you into the playoffs.
Right.
And you're going to continue to build, right? You're going to continue. It's not, like Armstrong said the other day, they didn't want to add somebody that puts this team in a bad situation in a couple years.
Yeah.
This is the exact contract they were looking for.
And he's 23.
Yes.
23. It's cool.
Yeah, I would much rather us have picked a developed smaller winger, or not picked, but traded for a developed smaller winger rather than grabbing one in the draft, like I think has been discussed. We still have the 4th overall pick, and we get a guy who is now officially on the Utah Mammoth website. That changed as soon as I updated the website from last night.
That's cool.
But a guy who scored 68 points, 27 goals, and we signed him to his jersey number, which is kind of cool. 77, 7.7 over 5 years, or 7.7 AAV for 5 years. I think is a great contract for a guy that's going to come in and get you 70 points. And like you guys said, we didn't pay much. He also stays healthy. And he should, that's pretty common among these younger players who are a little smaller. We even saw it a little bit with this last year with Logan Cooley and Dylan Gunther. These younger players who are kind of smaller built, oftentimes might struggle to stay super healthy. But over the last 3 years, JJ Peterka's played 77 games, 82 games, and 77 games. So guy that's going to come in and play the vast majority of your games and get you some points. Is pretty clear if you look at his stat projection. He's a guy who can not only score a lot, but has significantly increased his ability to pass the puck. And this last year averaged 18 minutes a game.
That's wild.
That's 18 minutes and 11 seconds a game. That's fantastic. So I'm super excited. I think obviously it hurts a little bit. It takes some processing for younger fans to let go of players, and you don't have to. You can root for them and continue to wish for their success. Like I think we're all going to wish for these two players to succeed unless they're playing Utah that are leaving. But you cannot. This is a deal that you have to make if it's available, and I think I definitely follow the thought process of Cole where this is teetering on a fleece. I think it is. When you consider that JJ Peterka and Josh Doan are the same age, and JJ Peterka has been able to maybe figure out his game a little bit earlier. So
I think he's more
it's not to say that we're not going to
offensively.
look back in a couple years and be like, oh man, we let go of a couple of really good players.
Yeah.
And I definitely hope that's the case, but I'm more hoping that JJ Peterka comes here and continues to do what he's doing. 23 is not even a fully developed player. So you've got a guy who can come in and continue to grow with this young core of guys and fit right in between that age gap of Keller and Cooley. And I don't know, it's exciting. It's a great move by Bill Armstrong, and anybody who's critical of it, I understand being frustrated, but anybody who's critical of it, just look at the numbers. It's telling
a no-brainer.
how good Bill is at his job.
Yeah,
And when
it's 68 points compared to 19 from Josh, 29 from Kesselring. Obviously, Kesselring's a defenseman, so he's not going to produce a ton. And Josh, I think, spent like 25 games in Tucson. But it is a no-brainer. As tough as it is to let go of those guys, it just makes so much sense.
I think too, the thing that you're looking at is that he's scoring 68 points on a team that doesn't is not known for winning games in Buffalo. And when you put them with dynamite players, when you surround them with people who are going to feed them the puck,
Put them with
people
Schmaltz and Hayton on that second line.
Yeah. And everybody can play to their full potential when they are in the right mix. And those things are great.
And taking a step back and just kind of looking at what Utah's done since this last year, they were prioritizing size and goal scoring. Obviously, there's some other things they need to work on as well, but those were two of the biggest things to attend to. They've done that. They added Daniil Boot. They added Dmitry Simishev. They've added Peterka. And I don't think they're done yet.
Yeah.
And so when you look at their forward lines, they're I don't believe they're bringing Nick Bukestad back. Carcone said that they're going a different direction. Bortuzzo's a defenseman. He's not coming back. But up front, you've now added a 68-point player in Peterka. You've added Daniil Boot, who is 6'7" and plays a very North American style of hockey.
Don't forget
that he goes at the net.
That's 6'7" without skates.
Big boy. This is a big boy.
Yeah.
And he's going to see some time. And as I just said, I don't think they're done. There's been a lot of reports that they're very open to potentially trading the fourth pick if they can get a player that's going to help them win now. Another Peterka or Sergachev type deal where you get a guy that more so fits your timeline and helps you win now, because the fourth pick is great. If they make it fantastic, you add another highly talented young prospect to your pool. But there's two things to consider. That player's probably not going to help you for 2 or 3 years.
Right.
And even, once they're ready, they're probably not a guy that's giving you 60, 70 points.
Right.
And the other thing too is Utah's running out of space to even sign most of their prospects because they've been doing this for a long time.
Let's talk about this for a little minute because people who are not used to the NHL do not understand cap space. So we have a budget to, this is me being Miss Rachel again. We have a budget that we need to stay within, and you can only pay players to fit within your budget. Every single team has the exact same budget, and you really need to be thoughtful about paying players within that budget, which means you can't go out and buy all these expensive players and then have nobody on the back end. What we're running into this summer is that we need to sign Logan Cooley and pay him every year for as long as we can hold on to him.
8 years. Hopefully.
Yeah. And so these are all things that need to be factored in. When you trade players, you're giving up some of your money that you're paying those players with, in addition to swapping kind of the other contracts with players. So a little bit of background for you there was that Doan and Kess were getting paid about $1 million. Does that sound right?
I think so.
And then we just signed this new player, JJ Peterka, for a 5-year deal for $7.7 million. So those are big numbers when you're talking about space. So when we're talking about cap space, we want to be staying within our player budget and getting as much for it as we possibly can. When we've been talking about the draft, we're talking about how those are cheap players because you're not paying them right off the bat.
Giving them less than $1 million a year.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're giving them entry-level contracts.
Right.
And Kelly, I can add some numbers
Please.
here for perspective
Do you have
if
your
you'd like.
Do you have your overalls on though? This is
I
Miss
should go put them
Rachel's
on real
friend.
quick.
He's wearing black.
I wish
just
there
like
was
he always does.
there should be a Miss Rachel filter on here.
Where's the headband?
Our cap space, because it increased this last, it increases every year, and it's projected to increase significantly over the next couple of years. But our cap limit is 95.5 million. We're currently at 80.5 million, and we have about 15 million in cap space after the JJ Peterka deal. So giving him 7.7 is a pretty good deal when you consider that the cap is going to increase. I think this last year it increased by 4 million. That gives you a lot of space and a lot of flexibility, especially considering the fact that you're going to have to pay Logan Cooley. And I don't know, I would hope, I just get this feeling that we're probably not quite done in this free agency / trade market. So it'll be interesting to see what they do, but we have a little bit of space and opportunity because we're not given Logan Cooley's not going to get 15 million a year. He's going to come in above what Gunther got, but not quite.
Probably 8 or 9, somewhere in between 8 and 9 is my expectation.
Yeah, I'm thinking 8.5, and even if we sign him at 9, I think that's a really good deal for us.
Yeah.
And that means we have pretty much all of our young talent signed for term. So,
and these are guys
exciting.
that, flash forward to 2-3 seasons from now, Peterka, Gunther, Cooley could all be knocking on the door of 100 points. That's a good team. That's a team that's not only going to get you into the playoffs, but that's going to compete. That's going to start competing for Stanley Cups.
Yeah.
And the cap will be over 100 million at that point.
Yeah.
The cap isn't just going to stop raising. The sport of hockey grows, and as the sport grows and the fandom grows, and markets like Salt Lake City are tapped into, the league is going to see a need to continue to grow that. I think I would hope that there's this attitude, because I think you see in a lot of markets like Buffalo where the ownership doesn't want to pay their players. The ownership doesn't want to pay them what they're worth on the open market. And I think you at least owe it to your players to do that. I think it's actually really helpful that our owner comes from basketball, where you're paying a player $7.5 million or 7.7.
Easy.
Chump change to a basketball team. You're paying a guy to sit on the bench 7.7 sometimes.
Right.
What's
$10
our
million.
What's our Jazz cap space? Do you know?
I just think
huge.
it helps that Ryan Smith and the SEG group are coming from basketball, because they're just like, As
Yeah.
long as we're under the cap, let's push this thing as much as we can. We got money.
Yeah.
And I think fans appreciate that.
Well, and to your point, Mike, talking about how I agree with you. I don't think Utah's done either. There's still some money to be spent. There's still assets to potentially be moved. But this probably does remove Utah from signing any of those free agents up towards the top of that list.
Mitch Marner, Sam Bennett,
Nicola Ehlers, Brock Besser,
Yeah.
and that's fine.
Yeah.
Peterka had 68 points. Ehlers had 63, and I think Besser was like high 50s, low 60s as well. So you are getting so much value out of this player. But it'll be interesting to see, where do they go from here? Do they move off the 4th pick and get somebody else? Do they?
We definitely lack size in our top 6 still. That's still a problem because Peterka isn't a particularly large player, and he doesn't play big game.
I don't think he's even really 6
He's
foot.
5'11" and 6 and 3/4.
I think 6 foot is gracious. I think he's more in like 5'10", 5'11". So yeah, they're definitely lacking size, but I think that's where your third line comes in, where re-signing McBain and adding Daniel Boot and Stenlund and Lawson Krause. Those lines are going to have to be effective because your goal scoring is going to come from the top 2 for the most part, but your physicality is definitely coming from 3 and 4.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that we also saw this season was obviously the Stanley Cup winners were the Florida Panthers, and they were just a feisty group. And what we were just discussing with Tyson Nash last week was that in order to move forward, in order to really be a contender for some of these teams, we need to be feisty. And it was just not something that we saw from Doan and Kess this year either. The famous Superman punch was actually fighting Kess.
Kess said he didn't really like to fight.
Yes.
And I literally, we interviewed him, and I asked him, I was like, do you like to fight? He's like, nah, not really. So then the cameras go away, and I was like, Kess, you should fight more. And he just laughed. I'm like, dude, you're humongous, and you pack
tall.
a punch.
I know. So it is something that we can be looking at moving forward because Peterka is one of those feisty players that we want to see out there.
I think feisty in terms of maybe being like a little obnoxious.
Yes.
I don't think he's dropping the gloves.
No.
I don't think he's delivering any nasty hits. But yeah, kind of a pest, a little bit more obnoxious. But with that being said, as in talking about where does Utah go from here, there's been some rumors that Utah could be in on Brad Marchand.
All right, I have a really good thing to say,
'Kay.
and I'm really excited. Is Mike here?
I think we lost Mike.
No, I'm here, guys. Sorry.
Okay, I'm just making sure.
Yep.
I have something that I want to tell you.
Let's hear it.
This is only because I'm friends with Bruins fans. So if you're already a Bruins fan, maybe you already know this. I did not know until very recently that Brad Marchand owns a company with Kevin Miller.
Mm-hmm.
You knew this and didn't tell me?
Well, I didn't know when it was pertinent.
Former Boston Bruin Kevin Miller and Brad Marchand own a company together. It's like an outdoor hunting, look at me, I don't know, the outdoor stuff, backpacks, gear,
Hiking yeah.
stuff. Kevin Miller lives in Camas.
Yeah.
So Brad has been hanging out here for a long time. Cole already knew this. I thought I was breaking news here.
It's my job.
But I'm
to
breaking
know.
news to these people. And so Brad was with I'm calling him Brad like he's my best friend. Marchand was in Boston for a lot of years. He was the captain. He just got traded almost right at the trade deadline when you can no longer trade to the Florida Panthers. He just won a cup with the Florida Panthers. And Utah, just hearing about that he has been here, loves coming here, has some sort of vested interest in being here, makes me more excited that might be a possibility, that Utah might be a place where he wants to be, because when you see something like that, even with the Panthers trade, you can take less money if you want to be there. And maybe that is potential for having Brad Marchand come here.
Yeah, I mean, and this is not like nonsense rumors. This is like Elliot Friedman saying, Utah is showing interest.
Yeah.
And there's even been more reports over the last 24, 48 hours that are saying, yes, Utah is still potentially interested in Brad Marchand. And I think there's a couple ways you got to look at this. First of all, does it make sense for both sides? I think for Utah, if you could get him on a short-term contract, like 2 years, I think it makes a lot of sense. Bring him in. This guy's going to teach your young players, your Coolies, your Gunthers, your Peterkas how to be obnoxious, get under the other, the opposition's skin, and play winning hockey. Because for most of the time he was in Boston, they were always a contender until, the last couple seasons. But he won a cup there. They were generally always making the playoffs and going fairly deep, a couple second, third round appearances. And then he goes to Florida this last season, does what he does best, helps that team stay at the top of the mountain and win another cup. And he did it by playing, Brad Marchand style hockey, which is rat hockey, and that's fantastic. That is what this team needs. Utah needs more grit. They need to be more annoying. And they need to do it, wise. Don't get yourself thrown in the penalty box.
Right.
But, tap a stick.
Yep.
Jab them in the crease. Annoy them. Draw a penalty so that then you're going on the man advantage. So I like it from Utah's perspective if you can get him on a short-term deal. I don't think this is a guy you want to give a 3 or 4 year contract because he would be 41.
Yeah.
I don't know that makes a lot of sense. But if you could, maybe overpay him a little bit to talk him into to come teach your team winning hockey, rat hockey, so that when Cooley and Gunther and Peterka are turning 23 and 24 and 25, you're stepping into your contention window and learning what it takes to win a Stanley Cup. For me, that's what makes sense. In terms of Marchand, does it make a whole lot of sense? I don't know. It depends on what he wants to do. He's won his cups. He's, been a very, successful player. He's been, he helped Canada win the Four Nations. So there's a lot of success. So if he's okay to just kind of like be a mentor at this point in his career and ride off into the sunset that way, sure, Utah makes a lot of sense. Great place, not a lot of pressure. You can come in and help build a culture. That to me is where it's appealing. But if he still wants to win, Utah really is not going to offer him that.
Right. He's probably likely to stick around in Florida.
Yeah.
Just like devil's advocate on what you're saying, though, this player being old is totally a thing. However, he had so many points this year.
Yeah, he did.
He had so many points this year. So you can't discredit that even if he's getting older, he's still putting up those insane playoff goals that we saw this season. He was putting up numbers with the Bruins and with the Panthers. And so same thing that we're saying with Peterka, if you're surrounding those players with big players, you're going to do big things.
Yeah, he had 51 regular season points.
Yeah.
Not like fantastic, but if he comes and does that in Utah,
yeah, that's all we need.
With all these other additions, you are a playoff team and you might be knocking on the door of the second round.
Yeah.
And then in terms of the playoffs, he had 20 points, 10 goals, 10 assists, and a lot of those were big goals. Those were game-winning goals. Those were game-sealing goals. Like I said, if Utah can get this guy on a short-term deal, makes a lot of sense.
I also think that
He's just muted, sorry.
I was going to say there's something to be said for having guys on your roster that have been in the playoffs and know how to.
Oh, 100%.
Like Sergachev came from Tampa, and we have seen the difference.
Stenlund.
Yep.
Yeah.
Stenlund, Ian Cole, Oli Bata.
Especially for young guys that haven't been there, just to kind of learn by osmosis.
Mentorship, 1,000%. It's so different to hear from a winner than
Someone who hasn't known what it takes to get there, right? Because all of these players were playing through injuries, playing through hardship, and just have to power through. And that's the grit that it takes.
Yeah, I think it comes back to what we heard in the Tyson Nash episode. Just him talking about it's important to just have any type of winners on your team, but to have a guy who's won a couple cups and plays that style of hockey, and not even a guy who brings a ton of size, like physical size to your top six, but brings an extremely big style of play to your top six and can teach these smaller players that we have signed for now 7 years. And Logan Cool will be another player who's not huge, who will be signed for hopefully 7 to 8 years at a major contract. So having a guy that is smaller, who can score and can come in and teach these guys on higher lines, I think would be super valuable. And my pitch to Brad Marchand is that anything can happen if you get in the playoffs. And if you're just saying we had Brad Marchand and JJ Peterka and we don't do anything else,
Great offseason.
what does 120 extra points a season get you?
Right.
It's significant. It's extremely significant, and we're not even talking about the jump that we saw Logan Cooley make this last year, the career year we just had our captain having, Clayton Keller having a fantastic year, a lot of these players taking the next steps. I just feel like if you get a guy like Brad Marchand, I think you're knocking on a little further than the second round, and you're threatening a lot of bigger teams in the West who have had a hard time maybe living up to their potential. Guys like teams like Winnipeg, teams like Edmonton, I think you totally have the opportunity to go in and knock off teams like those in the playoffs if you have a guy like Brad Marchand who can go in and just be an absolute menace for another team to deal with. So are we going to be signing Sam Bennett at this point? Probably not. Are we going to be signing Mitch Marner? There probably isn't the space for him. That's fine. But if you can go in and get a guy like Brad Marchand, I'm not sure exactly what he'd be commanding in the open market. If he was going to stay in Florida, I'm going to guess that he's probably going to get 5.5 to 6. If he's going to come somewhere else, you're going to have to give him $7 million, and maybe he takes it over 2 or 3 years, and it's worth it to sign a guy like that to come teach your other smaller players to come and play a little bit more like that. Because could you imagine Logan Cooley with just
Brad
a little bit of Brad,
mentality?
just a little sprinkle,
Dylan
sprinkle
Gunther?
of Brad Marchand?
Come on.
Yeah.
Well, and that's why I like it, because as you pointed out,
Yeah.
Utah doesn't have a lot of size up front. But if those guys are playing bigger than they actually are, it changes everything.
I think just looking at his style of play for sure is a big thing, because as we repeat in hockey, and I try to repeat in my own hockey all the time, know your role. Know your role. He was a short player to begin with, and he had to figure out, he's been in numerous interviews saying this, I had to figure out where I fit, and where I fit was being a rat, was just bugging players to the point that they were getting thrown in the penalty box for trying to drop gloves with me or whatever it may be. And that is kind of the mentality that every Utah player needs to adopt and adapt to, is know your role. If you're going to go out there and be the game-winning goal scorer, do that, right? Just know your role.
Well,
he's also a center.
Yeah.
And having him as a
amazing.
second line center,
Yes.
and being able to have Barrett Hayton
On third.
go down as a third line center. Barrett Hayton had a great year last year. Who knows? Maybe he continues to develop and can be a really good second line center eventually. Obviously, no hate on him, but could you imagine him on the third line and having Marchand centering Nick Schmaltz and JJ Peterka, or Nick Schmaltz and Dylan Gunther and Peterka plays on the first line? Like,
insane, lethal.
The line combinations become very enticing and interesting if you can sign a guy like that for some team friendly term, maybe not team friendly AAV, but just getting him on a shorter contract, and maybe, like Cole was saying, overpaying a little bit, I think would be great.
Definitely. So, well,
Is that all we had?
what do we?
Exciting emergency podcast.
I know.
Exciting.
I don't know. I think all three of us were kind of
All four of us.
all four of us were kind of spiraling last
gonna-
night with the news. Sorry, Tanner. All four of us. It's true. There's four of us in our group chat. But it's an exciting week, and tomorrow, if you guys are not tuning into the draft, first of all, cancel what you're doing. Tune into the draft. The
Look for
draft is an
Mike.
exciting event. I'll be there. So if you want to kind of see live stuff happening at NHL Utah, I'll be posting on X as well, just to kind of give you guys a scoop on what it's going to be like seeing that Mammoth sweater for the first time at the number 4 pick, or who knows what'll happen.
Yeah, like as I've said, anything's on the table, and I don't think Utah's done. So we'll see what that involves. Do they bring in somebody like Marchand? Do they, just kind of stick with what they've got? Do they trade the 4th pick? Anything's on the table. Anything could happen over the next 24 hours and over the next couple of weeks.
We might be doing another emergency podcast Saturday morning after the draft.
Yeah, so that people know, since this will be posted today, the draft is on the 27th, tomorrow, Friday, and then free agency opens on the 1st. the draft also goes over the weekend too because there's multiple rounds. But free agency's on Tuesday, July 1st.
Development camps
So
next week too.
We got a lot. we got a lot.
Yeah,
We thought this was the off
yeah,
season.
and the development camp's on the 3rd on Thursday. So
It's 29 through the
I
3rd.
freaking love free agency day. It's so exciting to see where players that you love who are going other places. It's exciting to see, you know, who gets signed and where they're going and how that fits. And last year it was insane because you had on the same day Steven Stamkos and Jonathan Marchessault sign in the same place, and then it didn't work out. So it's just fun to speculate. Just soak it all in. It's fun, especially if you're a new hockey fan. Pay attention.
It gives people like us with the podcast a lot to talk about.
We're busy. We're just popping up on a Thursday. Look at us. All right. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Utah Hockey Podcast. You can find us all over the socials at Utah Hockey Pod and also on YouTube under the KSL Sports Podcast tab. Thank you for being here and have a fantastic weekend. Draft weekend. Love ya.